Hi policy classmates, this is my lobby video 1 on employment for individuals with disabilities, including talking about Americans with Disability Act, and then also my personal view, Walmart, a case study, and it's presented by Alaina Peters. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about the law that makes individuals with disabilities able to engage in employment. So that is the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA. It became law in 1990. It was signed by George H.W. Bush. It's a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disability in all areas of public life, such as jobs, where I'll be focusing, school, transportation, and access to public and private places. So the ADA is divided into 5 sections or titles. Title 1 is employment, where I'm going to be focusing a lot of my attention on, and it is designed to help people with disabilities access the same employment opportunities and benefits as people without disabilities. So employers must provide reasonable accommodations to qualified applicants or employees so that they can perform essential job functions. We'll come back to this reasonable accommodations because it's going to be really important when I talk about my case study, but also it's really important when you think about employers and if they're willing to provide those and what their views of providing those are. This section of the ADA is regulated by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, or the EEOC, and this title only applies to employers with 15 or more employees. So that's really important to think about, that small businesses don't have to follow this. And then finally, in employment, it also gives a definition of what a disability is. So the ADA defines a disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment and that substantially limits one or more major life activities, a person who has a history or record of such impairment, or a person who is perceived by others as having such impairment. Moving on to Title II, that's state and local government. It prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals in all programs, activities, and services of public entities, meaning the state and local government. And basically the purpose of this section is to make sure that policies, practices, and procedures don't discriminate against people with disabilities. This is enforced by the DOJ, the Department of Justice. Title III is public accommodations. It sets the minimum standard of public accessibility and accommodations. It is also enforced by the DOJ, and it's so important because it's what gives individuals with disability that sense of independence for being able to travel by themselves and get from place to place. Title IV is telecommunications. It requires telephone and internet companies to provide system for individuals with hearing and speech disabilities to communicate over their services. So this has to do with closed captioning. When you see it on, TV shows, I always thought that was something that was like a courtesy that was provided, but no, that's the law. They have to provide it for people who have hearing impairments. And then finally, Title V, the miscellaneous provisions. So this just has to do with the relationship the ADA has to other laws. It has to do with state immunity, insurance providers, and benefits, and it's basically like a catch-all for everything else the ADA hasn't addressed. Next, we're going to talk about the barriers that a person who has a disability but wants to be employed could possibly face. So one of the big barriers that we're facing is that a majority of individuals who have a disability aren't currently employed, that only around 34% of them are employed. And then that after when I was watching a PBS video that was really good about the 25th anniversary of the ADA, there was a bunch of different individuals who have a lot of involvement in activism, and a lot of their comments were that there's still a discouragement for those individuals. They feel discouraged to apply for jobs because of past negative experience for applying for jobs and not being able to get them, and also with their own confidence in being able to work in that job. So this has to do with confidence and really encouraging people with disabilities that they can do it and that they can be employed and be successful. There is still some discrimination when it comes to people with disabilities, and that stems a lot from employers not wanting to decrease productivity, or that they don't want to supply that reasonable accommodation. So they have this fear of reasonable accommodation, that that's going to cost them way too much money, that they're going to have to change all these different things within their workplace, and that's not true at all. That the reasonable accommodation line is supposed to specifically be so that it doesn't have undue burden on the employer. There's also, within the community of individuals who have disabilities, there's this fear of losing their personal care attendants when they go to work. There's fear of losing their health care, that the health care they have currently is a lot better than what could be supplied to them by their future employer. And then also fear of losing that Social Security when they do go to work. Finally, another big barrier is access to affordable housing. This is really a big deal when we start thinking about the future of people who have disabilities, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more when it comes to aging in place, and about how housing is going to be a really crucial thing for people to be able to have access not only to affordable and safe housing, but also access to housing that's in an area where they have access to public transport when they are not able to transport themselves. Next, we're going to talk about how employment for an individual with disability affects the individual, but also community. So the first thing that we always have to think about is how we know participation in work in meaningful work and activities is really important in maintaining a healthy lifestyle mentally and physically. And so when we have more individuals who have disabilities involved in that they can live happier, healthier lives. We also have to think about that from a community standpoint, that there being more productive individuals in the community and inside society, which also gives back to the community. And then I want to take the community side approach from access and the ADA. So when I was watching, again, the videos from PBS, there was a lady who was wheelchair bound, and she was born before the ADA, but then she lived through the ADA being introduced, and later on, 25 years, she's still working after the ADA has been a law. And so what the main thing she said is that her accessibility to public transport was so important to her, that she was able to ride the metro in to work, and that she didn't have to rely on somebody else to take her to work, that she could, come with what she had to get to the metro, and that it was so much easier for her, and it was that sense of independence that was really important. Something else interesting in the video was how the ADA allowed one individual who was a Paralympic athlete for her to be able to participate in sports equally. So she, when she was in high school, was on the track team, but they would not provide her with her uniform, and they would not allow her to race in the races against her peers. And she thought that was unfair, so she sued for $0, and she won, and she was able to race and do the things that all her other peers were doing, which was really important for her sense of inclusion, and for, her sense of confidence in being able to be an active member and a helpful member to her team. And then finally, we also need to think about the community that's to come. So we all know that aging in place is something that is coming. The aging population is going to be booming. And from the video I had watched, they said that as many as 1/3 of the individuals who are aging could have and develop a disability from the chronic illnesses and disease that occur later in life. So something like Alzheimer's. And it's important to think about, we already have a community of individuals who are disabled, but there's a future community that is coming, and we need to take that into effect when we're thinking about the ADAs and the laws that we're writing. So when looking at what has been done when it comes to this field, in 2008, the ADAAA, or Americans with Disability Amendments Act, was signed into law. The basic purpose of this was to change the definition of disability so that was more inclusive. I already read to you what that definition was, but it impacted all the titles and sections of the ADA. So also what happened is that there were different resources that came about for individuals with disabilities who wished to be employed. One of those was EARN, or Employer Assistance and Resource Network on Disability Inclusion. It's a free national service that educates employers about effective strategies for recruiting, hiring, retaining, and advancing people with disabilities. There was also the JAN, the Job Accommodation Network. It provided free expert advice on workplace accommodations that may be necessary to assist qualified individuals with disability, and then it also helped them maintain maximum productivity once they were hired. There's a campaign for disability employment. It's an interest group, and it wants to better educate employers about the benefits and talents that come with hiring a person with disabilities, and it helps to get out basically public announcements about that. There's also technological advancements. When we look around, we know that technology has a really big impact on people with disabilities to be able to communicate and be mobile in the community, whether that's communication devices or wheelchairs or etc. Finally, there was a law like the Federal Partnership for Sustainable Communities. This was by the EPA, and basically what it is so that there was affordable housing that was accessible to transportation, so that individuals who had disabilities or who were aging in place had a better access to transportation when they were not able to transport themselves. And this was really important for their sense of independence and also their ability to stay where they were in a community. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about what needs to be done still for individuals with disabilities to have the most access to employment as possible. So again, going back to healthcare, so losing their healthcare, Social Security by becoming employed, there are things that are called ticket to work programs where individuals can start little by little working but still receiving the Social Security benefits so that they don't feel like they're losing out on the entirety of that income until they get settled and are able to make up for that income. Again, housing. So we need to have housing that's affordable for individuals with disabilities. If they can only work for, 5 hours a week and they can only get paid $55 a day, well, where's somewhere where they can, have the best chance of living that's sustainable for them? Community services and support. So this is so important. I mean, how many times have you gone into a building and been like, there's no way someone with a wheelchair could get in here, or there's no way it's safe for an individual who is on, like crutches or has braces. So, or things that where like when we went to our own community, our own campus, and the handicap door didn't work. I mean, what does that say about all the different things that need to be done? And you could go anywhere and you could still find violations, how it's not accessible for how it's supposed to be. So, and then also creating better supports for individuals with disabilities in the community and making sure that they're the best educated and have the best setup possible to be able to succeed. So I'm really excited to talk to you about my personal perspective. I took a point of view of it as a case study, talking about Walmart greeters. So coincidentally enough, I was going to always look at Walmart because they're a really big employer of individuals who have disabilities. And actually last week it came out that CEO Greg Foreman announced Walmart will be getting rid of the greeter position due to an increased pressure of low prices and the competitive nature of the retail industry. This was a really big hit and a really big shock for a lot of the people who support and work around the disabled community, and there has been a lot of backlash about it. So a couple facts is that Walmart will offer the employees another position unless if they are unable to complete the duties of that position, then they will have to leave. They have 60 days, or Walmart said that they would give an extended time for any individuals who needed it because of their special needs to either take the position or decide to leave. An interesting thing that Walmart likes to boast about is that they have 100% score by the Disability Equality Index. This is a company that looks at how well different corporations adhere to the ADA and following the different laws that they have to do. This doesn't mean that Walmart is 100% compliant by any means, but they have gotten a score of 100% 3 years in a row. Interesting enough, 91 other companies have also gotten this score. As I mentioned before, Walmart's getting a lot of backlash for this decision, and that there's already been 3 reports filed to EEOC, and that's the government provider that regulates Title I for employment with individuals with disability. And there's also been 1 federal lawsuit under the ADA. The idea of Walmart is to get rid of the greeter position and replace them with customer hosts that have more of a job duty of handling customer refunds, scanning receipts, and checking shopping carts. And they're supposed to be there to be a better focus on security and helping customers. The CEO brought up this idea that because not all disabilities are the same, each case requires a thoughtful solution. I had the honor of being able to talk to somebody who works in upper management at Walmart, and he thought that this was the exact same thing, that it's going to be on a case-to-case basis of where that individual will be offered a job or a position, but that all of them will be offered position. He assured me of that. He also had the idea that it was an overall focus on security, and that it made sense for Walmart to get rid of the greeter position because they were not financially helpful to Walmart as a whole. He told me that from his experience, he couldn't give me an exact number, but that about 10% of individuals who work with Walmart have some type of disability. He also told me that Walmart, he has seen firsthand them providing reasonable accommodations. There was an individual who was a customer host, but that could not stand for a long period of time, and Walmart made that accommodation by providing them with a chair. When I asked him about an individual with a wheelchair, what would be a job that they could do, because they can obviously not stock shelves, he told me that they would probably move to a position that's called a self-checkout host, where they would be able to sit and monitor, but they would be more focused on security. And interesting enough, he told me that these individuals were probably making $11 an hour, and that was not something that was thought of for why they're getting rid of the position, just that they need to be focused more on security, and that economically they can't have individuals that are just greeting and not checking carts or receipts. So I hope you've learned something from my presentation, and I hope we will all continue to be looking at this case of Walmart deciding to get rid of their greeters in the future. Thanks.